At my graduation dinner, Dad laughed and said, "You're old enough now, either pay rent or move out." The next day, when I showed them my new place and told them I wouldn't be covering their bills anymore, their faces went pale because the day I graduated college, after years of pushing myself to the absolute limit, should have been the proudest moment of my life. Instead, at our celebratory dinner, my father looked me dead in the eye and delivered an ultimatum that cut me to my core. He had no idea I'd been planning my escape for months, and that the look on their faces the next day would be worth every single penny I'd saved. You see, from the outside, we looked like the quintessential middle-class American family. We lived in a nice 4-bedroom house in Pennsylvania. My dad, Robert, had a good job as a senior systems analyst, and my mom, Diana, worked part-time at the library. My younger brother, Jake, and I never wanted for anything. We had annual beach vacations, birthday parties, and piles of presents at Christmas. Everything seemed picture perfect. But when I turned 15, everything shifted. Dad came home one day, his face strained. He'd been laid off. After 15 years, he was just gone. Mom picked up more hours, but her library salary barely covered groceries, let alone our mortgage. Dad kept reassuring us, "It's just temporary, I'll find something better." But that something better never materialized. Months bled into a year, and the only jobs he could find paid far less. His pride took a massive hit. I'd hear him late at night, the computer screen glowing on his frustrated face as he scrolled through job listings. The house, once so lighthearted, became a place of whispered arguments and palpable tension after Jake and I went to bed. By 16, I knew I had to help. I got a job at the local grocery store, bagging groceries after school and on weekends. My first paycheck was just over $100. I proudly handed it to my mom. She said, "Oh, honey, you should keep this," but I saw the relief flood her eyes. "I want to help, Mom. We're family," I insisted. What started as a gesture quickly became an expectation. When the electricity bill arrived with a past due notice, Dad looked pointedly at me. "Sophia, can you chip in this month? Just until I get back on my feet." I didn't mind at first. I picked up more shifts, added a weekend job waiting tables at a diner. My grades dipped, but I still managed a solid B average while working nearly 30 hours a week in high school. By senior year, I was paying for my own clothes, school supplies, activities, and still contributing around $300 a month to the household. Dad had found a job, but it paid half his old salary, and somehow, our finances never improved. What I didn't know then was that Dad had developed a gambling habit. He'd stop at the casino on his way home, convinced he could win back what we'd lost. Mom later told me she knew but felt powerless. He'd promise it was the last time, then be back at the slot machines days later. Jake, meanwhile, never seemed to notice. 3 years younger than me, he was completely sheltered. While I worked double shifts, he played video games with friends. He'd ask for the latest gaming console for Christmas, and somehow, the money appeared. When I needed new shoes for work, I bought them myself. "Your brother is still young," Mom would say when I pointed out the disparity. "Let him enjoy his childhood." So I did. I worked, I studied, I kept us afloat. I watched my father become dependent on my income, not as a temporary fix, but as a permanent solution to his own failures. My mother accepted it without question. And they both treated me differently, expecting adult responsibilities from me while allowing Jake teenage freedoms. When college acceptance letters rolled in, I had my pick of schools. But the full scholarship to our local state university made the decision simple. I couldn't leave my family financially, even though a part of me desperately wanted to escape. "You always were the responsible one," Dad said when I announced my decision. What he really meant was, "You're the one we can always count on for money." I moved into a dorm but came home every weekend to work my jobs, sending money regularly for bills, calling daily to check in. I watched my friends enjoy the full college experience, parties, spring break trips, while I declined invitations for extra shifts or sent money home for the property tax bill. Throughout it all, I told myself it was temporary. Once I graduated and found a good job, things would get better. Once Dad got back on his feet, I could focus on my own life. Once our family finances stabilized, I could start saving for my future. But deep down, an uncomfortable truth began to settle in. Nothing was going to change unless I changed it. College was supposed to be my ticket to freedom. Instead, it became another obligation to balance. My typical Monday started at 5 a.m. I'd shower, review notes for my 8 a.m. business ethics class, eating a protein bar on the go. After class, I'd rush to my part-time campus job at the admissions office, working from 10 to 2. Then afternoon classes until 5, a quick dinner, and studying until midnight. Tuesdays and Thursdays were similar, a relentless, hectic pace. Weekends offered no reprieve. I'd drive home Friday evening, head straight to the diner for the dinner shift. Saturdays meant a double at the grocery store. Sundays were split between diner brunch and laundry before heading back to campus. My roommate, Elaine, would often just be starting her weekend when I was ending mine. "You know this isn't normal, right?" Elaine said one Sunday evening, watching me stumble into our dorm, exhausted. "Most college students aren't paying their parents' bills." I just shrugged. "They need the help." "But do they really? Your dad has a job. Your mom works. Your brother's old enough to work part-time too. Why is it all on you?" Her questions made me so uncomfortable because I had no good answers. The truth was, I'd never questioned it. It had evolved so gradually, from helping during a crisis to becoming the family's financial safety net. Before I knew it, I was paying the electric bill, the internet bill, often the grocery bill too. "The internet is getting shut off," Mom would text. "Can you send $200 for the bill?" "Dad's car needs repairs. Can you help with the $500 mechanic bill?" "We're a little short on the mortgage this month. Can you contribute $800? Each request came with the unspoken expectation that I would comply, and I always did. I'd scrape together my earnings, eat ramen for a week, and send the money home. The gratitude would quickly fade, replaced by the next urgent need. During my sophomore year, the requests escalated even further. I was regularly sending nearly 70% of my earnings home. My own expenses were bare minimum. Used textbooks, clothes I'd worn for years, never eating out unless it was a free meal from my diner shift. That's when Elaine staged her intervention. "This has to stop," she said, sitting me down one evening. "You are killing yourself while your family takes advantage of you." "They're not taking advantage," I protested weakly. "They need help." "Then why isn't your brother helping? Why did your dad just buy a new television? Why did your mom post about their weekend getaway on social media?" I had no answers. The new TV appeared the same week I'd sent money for what Dad called essential bills. The getaway happened after I'd contributed to a desperate situation with the water heater. "You need to start saving for yourself," Elaine insisted. "Open a separate account they don't know about. Put something away each month, even if it's just $20. Something that's just for your future." That night, I did it. I opened a new savings account at a different bank. I set up a direct deposit for 20% of my earnings to go straight into that account before I could be tempted to send it home. It wasn't much at first, maybe $50 a week, but it was something. It was mine. As my junior year began, I connected with a financial advisor, Harriet, through a campus workshop. Harriet reviewed my situation with concern. "You've taken on an adult burden while you're still establishing yourself," she noted. "This pattern will continue as long as you allow it." With Harriet's guidance, I began to educate myself. Budgeting, investing, setting financial boundaries. We created a plan to gradually reduce my family contributions while building my own safety net. "Your first loyalty has to be to yourself, Sophia," Harriet reminded me. "You cannot help others if you are drowning." By my senior year, my separate savings account had grown to a respectable sum. I'd secured a high-paying internship with a marketing firm that valued my work ethic, and they'd offered me a full-time position upon graduation. For the first time, I could truly see a future not defined by my family's needs. That's when I made the decision that changed everything. With Harriet's help, I started looking at starter homes in a modest but growing neighborhood 20 minutes from campus. Prices were reasonable, and with my savings, excellent credit score, and new job offer, I qualified for a mortgage. I found a small 2-bedroom house with a yard and a front porch. It needed some cosmetic work, but it was structurally sound. The price was within my budget, especially considering what I'd been contributing to my parents' household all these years. 3 months before graduation, I closed on the house in secret. Only Elaine and Harriet knew. I arranged for the closing during spring break, telling my family I was working extra shifts. I signed the papers with trembling hands, simultaneously terrified and exhilarated by my boldness. "This is the first day of your independent life," Harriet said as she witnessed my signature. I kept the house empty for those 3 months, occasionally visiting to sit on the floor of what would soon be my living room, planning where furniture would go, how I'd decorate. But mostly, I prepared myself for the inevitable confrontation that would come when my family learned I was cutting financial ties. Graduation approached, and with it, a reckoning I both dreaded and desperately needed. Graduation day dawned bright and clear. I put on my cap and gown in the dorm room I'd shared with Elaine for 4 years, my emotions a tangled mess of pride, anxiety, and anticipation. "Today is about celebrating you," Elaine reminded me as she helped adjust my cap. "Try to enjoy it, no matter what happens later." The ceremony was held on the university's main lawn. As I took my place among my fellow graduates, I searched the crowd for my family. Mom waved enthusiastically, Dad checked his phone, and Jake looked bored. When my name was called, I walked across the stage, head held high. "Sophia Wilson, Bachelor of Business Administration, summa cum laude," the dean announced. I accepted my diploma with a firm handshake, turning to smile at the audience. In that moment, looking at the sea of faces, I felt a surge of accomplishment no one could diminish. This achievement was mine alone. After the ceremony, my parents found me. Mom hugged me tightly, Dad clapped me on the shoulder. "We're so proud," Mom said, her eyes genuinely warm. "For years gone just like that," Dad added. "Time to join the real world now." Jake gave me a perfunctory hug. "Can we go eat?" "I'm starving." My parents had reservations at a mid-range Italian restaurant near campus. Not the fanciest, but a step up from our usual. As we were seated, Dad made a show of telling the waiter, "We're celebrating our daughter's graduation today." The waiter replied with a smile, "Congratulations. First round of drinks is on me." Dad ordered an expensive bottle of wine. Mom chose one of the pricier pasta dishes. Jake selected a nearly $30 steak. I chose a simple chicken parmesan, already calculating how much this celebration would cost me because despite Dad's grand announcement, I knew who would be paying the bill. Throughout the appetizers, the conversation was light. Mom asked about my fellow graduates. Dad inquired about the speakers. Jake complained about sitting in the sun. No one asked about my job plans or what came next. It was as if my graduation marked the end of something, rather than a beginning. As our main courses arrived, Dad cleared his throat and raised his wine glass. "A toast to our graduate, Sophia. We can't tell you how proud we are of what you've accomplished." I smiled and raised my glass, allowing myself a moment of genuine connection. "You've always been responsible," Dad continued, "always thinking of the family first. That's a rare quality these days when so many young people only think of themselves." Mom nodded, her eyes misty. "But," Dad said, his tone shifting ever so slightly, "graduation marks a transition to full adulthood. And with adulthood comes adult responsibilities." My stomach tightened. I knew what was coming. "Your mother and I have discussed it. And we think it's time you started contributing more formally to the household expenses." I nearly choked on my wine. "More formally?" "Dad, I've been paying bills since I was 16. He waved his hand dismissively. Yes, you've helped out here and there, but now that you'll have a real job, it's time for a more structured arrangement." "Here and there," I repeated, incredulous. "I paid the entire electric bill last month and the internet, and half the mortgage." "That's all in the past," Dad said firmly. "We're talking about the future. You're old enough now to pay rent or get out." The restaurant noise seemed to fade away as I stared at my father. His expression was matter-of-fact, as if he were discussing the weather rather than delivering an ultimatum that completely ignored years of my financial support. "We think $800 a month is fair," he continued. "Plus continuing to help with utilities, of course. You'll be making good money now, and this will still be cheaper than getting your own place." Jake snickered. "Welcome to adult life, sis." I looked at my mother, hoping for some recognition of the absurdity of this demand. But she was studiously examining her pasta. "Let me get this straight," I said, my voice surprisingly steady despite the anger building inside me. "After supporting this family financially through high school and college, working multiple jobs while maintaining a 4.0 GPA, you now want me to pay you $800 a month in rent plus utilities?" "Don't be dramatic, Sophia," Dad replied. "We've supported you your entire life. Put a roof over your head, food on the table. Now it's time for you to do your part." I wanted to scream. I wanted to list every dollar I'd contributed over the past 7 years. I wanted to throw the expensive wine in his face and walk out. Instead, I took a deep breath and said, "I'll think about it." That seemed to satisfy him. The conversation moved on to Jake's summer plans, which apparently involved a road trip with friends that my parents were helping fund. I sat in silence, pushing my chicken around the plate, appetite gone. When the bill came, the waiter placed it in front of my father. Dad looked at it, then slid it across the table to me with a wink. "Consider this your first adult expense. $178. I placed my credit card on the bill without comment, ignoring Jake's smirk and my mother's uncomfortable glance away. The drive home was silent. I stared out the window, mentally calculating how much money I had given my family over the years and how much I had left in my secret account. By the time we pulled into the driveway, I had made my decision. Tomorrow would be the beginning of my new life, whether they were ready for it or not. Sleep completely eluded me that night. I lay in my childhood bedroom, staring at the glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling that had been there since I was 10. The dinner conversation replayed in my mind on an endless loop. The casual dismissal of my years of contribution. The entitlement in my father's voice. The silence from my mother. The smug look on Jake's face. 6 months earlier, I had sat across from Harriet in her small office, nervously twisting a tissue in my hands. "I need to make a change," I had told her. "But I'm afraid of what it will do to my family." Harriet had looked at me with compassion, but also with firmness. "Sophia, we have reviewed your finances together for over a year now. Do you know what I see?" I shook my head. "I see someone who has contributed over $30,000 to her family's expenses while taking on student debt and working herself to exhaustion. I see parents who have come to expect this support as their due. And I see a pattern that will continue indefinitely unless you break it." She pulled out a folder containing the documentation we had compiled together, bank statements showing transfers to my parents, receipts for bills paid, a spreadsheet tracking every contribution. "Your starting salary at Meridian Marketing will be $60,000 annually. If you continue supporting your family at current levels, you will give them approximately $24,000 each year. That is 40% of your income." When she put it that way, the situation seemed even more absurd. "You have saved diligently despite these demands," Harriet continued. "You have $15,000 in your separate account. That is enough for a down payment on a modest home in several neighborhoods we have discussed." That day, we had mapped out a plan. I would continue my contributions until graduation to avoid conflict. Meanwhile, I would work with a realtor to find a suitable property close before graduation and move immediately after. Bernard, the realtor Harriet recommended, had been instrumental in finding my little house on Maple Street. He understood my budget constraints and my timeline. We looked at dozens of properties before finding the right one. A 1950s bungalow with good bones but outdated decor, 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a small kitchen, and a surprisingly spacious living room with a fireplace. "The owners are motivated sellers," Bernard had explained. "They've already moved to Arizona and just want to close quickly." The asking price was $175,000. With my credit score and savings, plus a first-time home buyer program, Bernard helped me secure a mortgage with payments less than what my father was demanding in rent. The closing had been nerve-wracking. I had taken a day off from classes, telling my parents I had an important exam. Instead, I had sat at a table with strangers, signing document after document until my hand cramped. When the final paper was signed, Bernard had handed me the keys with a smile. "Congratulations, homeowner." Now, lying in my childhood bedroom for what I knew would be the last time, I felt a strange mix of sadness and resolution. This house held memories, not all of them bad, but it also represented a dynamic that had become increasingly toxic. At 6 a.m., I rose quietly and began packing. I was surprised by how little I actually owned, despite having lived there most of my life. My clothes fit into 2 suitcases. My books and personal items filled 3 boxes. My jewelry, mostly inexpensive pieces I'd bought myself, fit into a small pouch. By 7:30, everything was stacked neatly by my bedroom door. I could hear movement in the kitchen, my mother's familiar footsteps, the gurgling coffee maker. Taking a deep breath, I carried the first suitcase downstairs. Mom looked up from the kitchen table, surprise crossing her face. "You're up early. Want some coffee?" "No thanks, Mom. I'm moving out today." Her coffee cup paused halfway to her lips. "What? Because of what your father said?" "Honey, he didn't mean you have to leave immediately." "I know," I replied, setting the suitcase by the front door. "But I've been planning this for a while. It's time." She followed me as I went back upstairs for the second suitcase. "But where will you go? Do you have an apartment lined up? You can't just leave without a plan." I smiled despite myself. She genuinely had no idea I was capable of making plans without their knowledge or input. "I have a place," I said simply, adding the second suitcase to the first. By now, the commotion had awakened my father. He appeared in the hallway, hair disheveled, robe hastily tied. "What is going on?" he demanded. "Sophia says she's moving out," Mom explained, wringing her hands. Dad looked at the suitcases, then at me, his expression shifting from confusion to anger. "Because of last night?" "For God's sake, we were just having a conversation about adult responsibilities. There's no need for dramatics." "This isn't about last night," I said, returning upstairs for my boxes. "This has been my plan for months. I'm starting my new job on Monday, and I need to be settled in my new place before then." "New place?" Dad followed me up the stairs. "What new place? You can't afford a place of your own yet. You need to build up savings first." The irony of him lecturing me about savings when he had systematically drained mine for years was almost laughable. "My new place is all taken care of," I said, lifting a box of books. "I've been saving and planning for this." "Saving?" Dad's voice rose. "How could you be saving when you've been helping us with expenses?" I didn't answer, focusing instead on carrying my belongings downstairs. Mom was now sitting on the bottom step, looking lost. Jake had emerged from his room, watching the scene with unusual attentiveness. "The moving company will be here at 9 o'clock, I announced, checking my watch. "I just need to get everything downstairs before they arrive." "Moving company?" Mom's voice was faint. "Sophia, this is all so sudden." It wasn't sudden to me. It was the culmination of years of growing awareness and months of careful planning. But I understood that to them, it seemed to come out of nowhere. They had never considered that I might have a life separate from their needs. "You'll still help with the bills, right?" Dad asked, his anger giving way to concern. "Even if you're not living here." And there it was. Not worry about my well-being or sadness at my departure, but immediate concern about how my decision would affect their finances. "No," I said, the single word feeling like both a betrayal and a liberation. "I will not be paying your bills anymore." The silence that followed was profound. My father's face flushed red. My mother's eyes filled with tears. Jake looked from them to me, finally seeming to understand the dynamics at play. "You can't just abandon your family." Dad sputtered eventually. "I'm not abandoning anyone," I replied. "I'm simply starting my own life." "You always said that was what you wanted for me." The moving truck arrived precisely at 9. 2 men efficiently loaded my meager belongings. I did a final sweep of my room, checking drawers and closets for anything forgotten. As I turned to leave, I noticed my mother standing in the doorway, looking smaller somehow. "I didn't realize how little you have," she said softly. After all these years, it was the closest she had come to acknowledging the imbalance that had defined our relationship. I hugged her briefly, then headed downstairs where my father was arguing with the movers about their parking position. "Dad," I interrupted, "I'm leaving now. I'll call you in a few days when I'm settled." He turned to me, his expression a complex mix of anger and disbelief. "This is how you repay us for everything we've done for you? By running away the moment we ask you to contribute." The unfairness of his statement struck me like a physical blow. But instead of arguing, I simply handed him an envelope. "What is this?" he asked. "A copy of my new address in case of emergency," I replied. "And a record of the financial contributions I have made to this household over the past 7 years. I thought you might want to review it before we talk again." Then I walked out the door, climbed into my car, and followed the moving truck to my new home and my new beginning. The moving truck pulled up in front of my house at 9:04 that morning. My house. The phrase still felt strange in my mind. The modest bungalow with its faded blue paint and white trim looked exactly as I remembered from my previous visits, but now it was truly mine. I parked behind the truck and sat for a moment, taking in the sight. The small front yard needed attention, the grass overgrown, a few weeds pushing through cracks in the concrete path. The porch had a slight sag on one side. The gutters could use cleaning. But the bones were good, and it was mine. Every imperfection represented freedom. The movers, Tim and Carlos, unloaded my few possessions quickly. When all the boxes and suitcases were stacked in the living room, Tim handed me the clipboard to sign. "That's it?" he asked, looking around. "Nothing else coming?" "No," I replied. "Just starting out." Carlos nodded approvingly. Best way to do it. No clutter, fresh beginning. After they left, I stood in the center of my empty living room, overwhelmed by the silence and space. I had furniture being delivered later that day, the bare essentials I'd ordered online: a bed, a couch, a small dining table with 2 chairs. It wasn't much, but it was a start. The rest of the morning was spent unpacking my clothes and personal items. I'd bought cleaning supplies earlier in the week, so I wiped down counters and swept floors. The house had been cleaned before closing, but it had sat empty for several weeks, and dust had accumulated. Around noon, a knock at the door startled me. I opened it to find an older woman with silver hair and bright eyes standing on my porch. "Hello there," she said warmly. "I'm Doris Abernathy from next door. I saw the moving truck earlier and wanted to welcome you to the neighborhood." She held out a ceramic dish covered with foil. "Just a simple casserole. Moving day is exhausting, and everyone needs to eat." I accepted the dish with genuine gratitude. "Thank you so much. I'm Sophia Wilson. I just graduated college, and this is my first house." Doris beamed. "How wonderful. A young homeowner. That's not something you see every day anymore." We chatted for a few minutes, Doris filling me in on the neighborhood, the couple across the street who'd lived there for 30 years, the young family 2 doors down with twins, the best day for trash collection, and which local grocery store had the freshest produce. "If you need anything at all, you just come knock," she said as she prepared to leave. "Oh, and the previous owners left some perennial bulbs in the garden. They'll come up next spring. Beautiful tulips and daffodils." After Doris left, I felt slightly less alone. The idea that flowers planted by previous owners would bloom in my garden next year gave me a strange sense of continuity, a connection to the history of this place that was now mine. The furniture delivery arrived at 3 p.m. 2 men efficiently assembled my bed frame and positioned the couch and table. By 5, I had a semblance of a home. The bed was made with new sheets. The couch faced the small fireplace. The dining table sat in the sunny corner of the kitchen. That first night alone in my house was both terrifying and exhilarating. Every creak and rustle of the old building made me jump. The shadows seemed different from those in my childhood home. The street noises were unfamiliar. But underlying the nervousness was a profound sense of accomplishment. I had done this. I had created this opportunity for myself despite years of financial drainage and emotional manipulation. I slept fitfully that first night, waking several times. By morning, though, I felt more settled. I made coffee in the new coffee maker I'd treated myself to and sat at my little table planning my day. Monday would be my first day at Meridian Marketing, but I had the weekend to continue organizing. Sunday evening, my phone began buzzing with texts from my family. I had deliberately kept my phone off for most of the weekend, needing space to process the enormous change in my life. Now, the outside world was intruding. "Mom, hope you are settled in. Please let us know you are okay. Dad, the internet bill is due Tuesday. Will you be sending money? Jake, Dad is freaking out about bills. What did you do? I responded only to my mother, assuring her I was fine and settled. To the others, I maintained silence. It was harder than I expected. Years of conditioning had taught me to respond immediately to financial requests, to prioritize their needs above my own comfort or plans. Breaking that pattern felt almost physically painful. Monday came, and with it, my first day as a marketing coordinator at Meridian. The day passed in a blur of new faces, orientation sessions, and paperwork. By the time I returned to my little blue house, I was exhausted but exhilarated. This was the beginning of my career, my independent life. Tuesday brought more texts from my father, increasingly urgent. Dad, the electricity bill is past due. They are threatening to shut it off. Dad, did you get my message about the internet bill? It is important for Jake's schoolwork. Dad, Sophia, you cannot just ignore your family responsibilities. Wednesday, my mother called during my lunch break, her voice tight with worry. Honey, I know you're establishing your independence, and I respect that, but your father is very stressed about the bills. Could you just help us out one more time while we figure things out? Mom, I said gently, I have been helping out one more time for 7 years. Dad needs to figure out how to manage the household budget without my income. But the electricity might be shut off tomorrow, she said, her voice trembling. And the internet already has been. Jake has a paper due. The guilt was immediate and overwhelming. I almost caved right then. Almost offered to pay the bill, just this once. But Harriet's voice echoed in my mind. This pattern will continue as long as you allow it. I'm sorry, Mom, I said. I cannot help anymore. Dad has a job. You have a job. The two of you need to figure this out. Thursday evening, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find my entire family standing on my porch. Dad looked angry. Mom, anxious. Jake, uncomfortable. This is where you... Live now? Dad asked without preamble, looking past me into the house. You bought a house? Yes, I replied, blocking the doorway. Would you like to come in? They filed past me into the small living room. Dad immediately began examining everything, checking the fireplace, looking at the ceiling, opening doors to inspect other rooms. Mom sat cautiously on the edge of the couch, hands folded in her lap. Jake wandered into the kitchen, opening the refrigerator without asking. How did you afford this? Dad demanded. Where did the money come from? I saved, I said simply. And I qualified for a first-time home buyer program. Saved from what? His voice rose. You gave us every spare penny. Not every penny, I corrected. I set aside a portion of my earnings for my future. I have been doing it for years. So you lied to us? He accused. All those times you said you were broke, that you couldn't help more with the bills, you were hiding money. Several of my new neighbors were out in their yards, pretending not to watch the confrontation. Doris had come out to water her flowers, her concerned gaze flickering to us occasionally. I never lied, I said firmly. I contributed thousands of dollars to your household. I worked multiple jobs through high school and college to help support the family, but I also protected myself because no one else was going to. We are your parents, Mom interjected. We have always protected you. Have you? I asked, looking directly at her. Or have you protected Dad and his poor financial choices at my expense? Her gaze dropped to her hands. The electric company shut off the power this afternoon, Dad said, his anger giving way to desperation. The house is dark. The food in the refrigerator will spoil. Is that what you want? Of course not, I replied. But I want you to understand that it is not my responsibility to fix this. It never should have been. Jake had returned from his inspection of my kitchen. So what? You're just going to let us suffer because you're mad about paying rent? That's cold. Jake, this is not about rent, I said, my own frustration building. This is about 7 years of supporting this family while being treated like a personal ATM. This is about Dad's gambling and Mom's enabling and you never having to contribute a dime while I worked myself to exhaustion. The word gambling hung in the air. Jake looked at Dad in confusion. Mom's eyes filled with tears. You don't know what you're talking about. Dad blustered, but the fight was leaving his voice. I think I do, I replied. And I think it is time we all acknowledge the reality of our family dynamic. How dare you accuse me of gambling, my father said, his voice dangerously low. After everything we have done for you. Dad, please, I replied, trying to keep my tone even. Let us be honest with each other for once. I know about the casino visits. I know about the online poker accounts. I know about the loans. His face paled slightly, but he maintained his defensive posture. Everyone needs recreation. A few games here and they're not gambling. Mom was staring at the floor, refusing to meet anyone's gaze. Jake looked confused, his eyes moving from Dad to me and back again. What is she talking about? He asked Mom. Dad doesn't gamble. The silence that followed was answer enough. Jake's expression shifted from confusion to disbelief. Is that true? He pressed. Is that why we're always broke even though you and Mom both work and Sophia has been paying bills? Your sister is exaggerating, Dad insisted. And regardless, our financial situation is none of your concern. What matters now is that your sister has abandoned her family obligations and left us in a desperate situation. I walked to my new dining table where my laptop sat and opened a spreadsheet I had created with Harriet's help. I think we need to look at some facts. I turned the screen so they could all see it. This is a record of every financial contribution I have made to our household since I was 16 years old. Every bill payment, every grocery purchase, every direct deposit to your account. The spreadsheet was meticulous, with dates, amounts, and descriptions of each transaction. 7 years of financial support laid out in black and white. The total at the bottom is $87,342, I said. That is how much I have contributed to our family while working minimum wage jobs and attending school full-time. Mom gasped. Dad's face flushed red. Even I was shocked seeing the number in its entirety. Somehow, adding it all up made the situation even more stark than I had realized. That cannot be right, Dad muttered, leaning closer. You are making this up. I have receipts and bank statements for every entry, I replied. This is not an estimate. This is the exact amount I have given to support our family. While you gambled away your paycheck and Mom pretended not to notice. Mom let out a sob, covering her face with her hands. I didn't know what to do, she whispered. He kept saying it was the last time, that he would win it all back. That is what addicts always say, I said gently. But it is never the last time without real help. Jake had moved to look at the spreadsheet, his expression hardening as he scrolled through the entries. You paid for my graduation party? He asked, pointing to an entry from the previous year. Dad said he saved up for it. I paid for a lot of things that were supposedly from Dad, I confirmed. Birthday gifts, Christmas presents, car repairs. I paid you back for some of those. Dad protested weakly. Some, I agreed. A small fraction. Jake turned to our parents, anger evident on his face. Why was Sophia paying for everything? Why did neither of you ever tell me what was really going on? We wanted to protect you, Mom said, finally looking up. We didn't want you to worry about adult problems. So instead, you let Sophia carry everything? Jake's voice rose. She is only 3 years older than me. She was still a kid, too. His defense of me was unexpected and touching. For years, I had resented his carefree existence while I struggled. Now I realized he had been as much in the dark as I had been. The point is, Dad said, trying to regain control, we are in crisis now. The electricity is off. We need help. I closed the laptop and faced my family. I am willing to help, but not by giving you money. That approach has not worked for 7 years, and it will not work now. What does that mean? Dad asked suspiciously. It means I will help you develop a realistic budget based on your actual income. It means Dad needs to get help for his gambling addiction. It means Mom needs to stop enabling destructive behaviors. And it means Jake might need to get a part-time job to contribute, just like I did at his age. Gambling addiction is a strong term, Dad mumbled. Is it? I asked. How much have you lost in the past year alone? How many times have you promised to stop? How many bills have gone unpaid because the money went to gambling instead? He had no answer. I own this house outright, I said, the statement causing all 3 of them to stare at me in shock. No mortgage. I saved enough for a substantial down payment, and the first-time home buyer program covered the rest, based on my income and credit score. That is impossible, Dad said, but his voice lacked conviction. Not impossible when you have been saving since you were 16 and recently received a signing bonus from your new employer, I replied. Not impossible when you have been learning about financial planning instead of looking for the next quick win. The reality of my independence was finally sinking in. My father's face had gone from red to pale, the full implications becoming clear. I would not be returning to rescue them. I would not be sending money. The ATM they had relied on for years was permanently closed. So that is it? Dad asked, a note of desperation creeping into his voice. You're just cutting us off completely? I am giving you a choice, I clarified. Option 1. I help you create a financial plan. Dad seeks treatment for gambling addiction. Mom takes a more active role in household finances, and Jake contributes through part-time work. We rebuild our relationship on healthier terms. And option 2? Mom asked quietly. Option 2 is that you continue as you have been, but without my financial support. You figure it out on your own. That is not much of a choice, Dad muttered. More choice than I had at 16, I replied evenly. The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken emotions. Years of resentment, manipulation, and misplaced responsibilities hung between us. Finally, Jake spoke up. I want option 1. And I already applied for a job at the grocery store where Sophia used to work. Mom looked at him in surprise, then at me. I want option 1 too. I should have been stronger years ago. I am sorry, Sophia. All eyes turned to Dad. He stood rigid, pride warring with necessity on his face. You really own this house? He asked again. I nodded. And we might lose ours if things do not change, he acknowledged reluctantly. The second mortgage you took out last year without telling Mom is catching up to you, I said, revealing that I knew even more than they thought. Mom gasped. Second mortgage, Robert? You said that was a small personal loan. Dad's shoulders slumped. The facade finally crumbled completely. I will try option 1, he said, his voice barely audible. But I don't have a problem. I can stop anytime. That is the first thing we will need to address, I said firmly. You cannot solve a problem you will not acknowledge. As they prepared to leave, the reality of their situation visibly weighed on them. No electricity at home. Mounting bills. Secrets exposed. The dynamic had shifted irreversibly. We will talk tomorrow about next steps, I said as they stood on my porch. For tonight, you can stay at the Comfort Inn on 4th Street. I will call and pay for one night while you figure things out. It was the only financial assistance I was willing to offer, a buffer to ease the transition rather than a return to old patterns. As their car pulled away, I felt a complex mix of emotions: guilt for their predicament, anger at years of exploitation, hope that real change might be possible. But most of all, I felt an overwhelming sense of liberation. The truth was finally out in the open, and with it came the possibility of healing. 3 months after that confrontation on my porch, life had changed dramatically for all of us. My little blue house had truly become mine, with personal touches that made it feel like home. I'd painted the living room a warm cream color, hung curtains, and planted flowers in the front yard with advice from Doris. Each change, no matter how small, represented my independence and growing sense of self. At work, I was thriving. My position at Meridian Marketing challenged me in ways school never had, and my supervisors had already recognized my work ethic and organizational skills. A small promotion came after just 2 months, along with the responsibility of managing our social media accounts. The stability of a regular paycheck that was mine alone felt like a luxury after years of immediately dividing my earnings among various family needs. The relationship with my family had evolved into something I couldn't have imagined on that tense graduation night. It hadn't been easy, and there had been setbacks, but progress was undeniable. Dad had initially resisted attending Gamblers Anonymous meetings, insisting he could control his habit without help. It took the mortgage company sending a formal notice of foreclosure proceedings to finally break through his denial. The night he received that letter, he called me in tears, something I had never witnessed before. I don't want to lose our home, he had said, his voice breaking. I don't want to lose my family. Please help me. The next day, I drove him to his first GA meeting. He had gone 3 times a week since then. The process was difficult for him, requiring an honesty and vulnerability that didn't come naturally after years of deception. But seeing him work through the 12-step program, acknowledging the harm his addiction had caused, gave me hope that real change was possible. He even landed a new position at Anderson Technology, not management, but a solid salary with room to grow. Mom had found full-time work as an office manager at a local dental practice, doubling her previous income from the library. The job seemed to give her not just financial security, but a confidence I hadn't seen in her before. She had also started attending support groups for families of gambling addicts, learning how her enabling behavior had contributed to the problem. "I thought I was protecting everyone by keeping the peace," she told me over coffee one Sunday afternoon. "But I was just making it possible for the situation to continue. I failed you, Sophia. I let you carry burdens that were never yours to bear." Her acknowledgement of my experience was healing in ways I had not expected. For years, I had felt invisible in my own family, valued only for what I could provide financially. Having my mother truly see me was a gift. Jake had surprised everyone with his response to the family crisis. He secured a part-time job at the grocery store and contributed his earnings to the household expenses. More importantly, he had stepped up emotionally, often mediating between our parents when tensions rose during financial discussions. "I never realized how much you did for us," he had told me one evening when he visited my house. "I was so caught up in my own life that I didn't see what was happening right in front of me. I'm sorry for being such a self-centered jerk." His apology meant more than he could know. The resentment I had carried toward him for years began to dissolve, replaced by a genuine fondness for the young man he was becoming. As for me, the most significant change was internal. The constant anxiety about money that had been my companion since adolescence was gradually subsiding. I was learning to spend on myself without guilt, to save for my future without fear, and to establish boundaries without apology. Part of that growth included dating for the first time in years. Between work and family obligations, romantic relationships had seemed an impossible luxury during college. Now I was seeing Vincent, a graphic designer I'd met through work. Our relationship was still new, but his respect for my independence and understanding of my family history made him easy to be with. My friendship with Elaine had deepened as well. She had been right all along about my family dynamic, and her unwavering support had been crucial during the difficult transition. We met weekly for dinner, alternating between her apartment and my house, sharing stories and advice as we navigated early adulthood together. The family financial situation had stabilized somewhat. With Dad's gambling under control, Mom's new job, and Jake's contribution, they had managed to negotiate with the mortgage company and keep the house. They were on a strict budget that I had helped create, but did not fund. Sometimes they slipped up, and occasionally Dad would hint about needing help with an unexpected expense, but I maintained my boundaries with gentle firmness. "I can help you figure out how to handle that within your budget," I would offer instead of money. "Or we can look at what expenses might be reduced this month to cover it." It wasn't always easy. Years of conditioning had trained me to rescue them at any cost to myself. Sometimes the guilt was overwhelming, especially when Mom mentioned having to cancel small luxuries or when Jake talked about delaying his college plans to work more hours. But I reminded myself that true help meant supporting their independence, not fostering dependence. One Sunday evening, almost exactly 3 months after our confrontation, my family came to my house for dinner. It was our new tradition, a weekly meal together that symbolized our changing relationship. I had prepared a simple but delicious meal, and we sat around my small dining table, the conversation flowing more easily than it had in years. "I have some news," Dad announced as we finished dessert. "I have been offered a position at Anderson Technology. It's not management level like my old job, but the salary is better than what I'm making now, and there is room for advancement." "That's wonderful," Mom exclaimed, genuine pride in her voice. "Congratulations, Dad," I added, reaching over to squeeze his hand. "You deserve this opportunity." He squeezed back, his eyes suspiciously bright. "I couldn't have done it without all of you, especially you, Sophia. Your tough love saved this family, even when we fought against it." His acknowledgement brought tears to my eyes. For so long, I had wanted nothing more than for my parents to see me, to value me for more than my financial contribution. This simple recognition felt like the closing of one chapter and the beginning of another. As they prepared to leave that evening, Mom hugged me tightly. "I am so proud of the woman you have become," she whispered. "You taught us all what real strength looks like." Standing on my porch, watching their car drive away, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't experienced in years. The journey had been painful, the confrontations difficult, and the changes challenging. But through it all, I had discovered my own worth beyond what I could provide for others. I had learned that true family supports each other's growth rather than exploiting each other's weaknesses. Most importantly, I had learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is to stop rescuing them and instead stand beside them as they learn to rescue themselves. Life wasn't perfect. My family still struggled at times. I still battled old habits of over-responsibility. But we were all growing, healing, and building something healthier together. And that was worth every difficult conversation, every painful boundary, and every brave step toward change.